I just want to open up this one now and a couple people touched on this a little bit. Like Suzanne, you were talking about there's a lot of different things that go into this. It's not just one. It's not just faith leaders or this has to be like multi-sector, not just multi-faith, but multi-sector, like collaboration, all the three C's on it. Collaboration, co-creation, and coordination. So I'm going to start this second session by calling on Ava Weitzman and Ben Christensen, who come from the corporate world, just to see, because I think corporations have to be involved in this too. Ideally local, any local, but just like the donor thing, if we have like a partnership of local, regional, and global corporations, big and small, but I want to hear from Eva first and then Ben on how you think the corporate world, corporate executives, but eventually corporations can plug into this and help to empower folks.
I'd really like to start us right where we left off, and that is the individual lives and experiences of people on the ground who are experiencing trauma and tragedy at the hands of religious discrimination and conflict. Because that's where the conversation begins, I think, for all of us, is those individual conversations. And yesterday I talked a little bit about sectors and corporations, and sort of there was a lot of hand waving about how magical this would all be. And today, the conversation is really about how do we operationalize this? What does this look like on the ground? So if you'll indulge me, many of you have your phones with you, and I'm going to ask you to please just I'm a teacher. I'm so sorry. I got to do this. This is an arbitrary example that I chose this morning as I was sitting here because there were these bottles of Coca-Cola here. And I got curious. I'm like, let's just look at Coca-Cola as a concrete example of this. And so if you wouldn't mind, pull up the corporate social responsibility page. The header is social impact at the Coca-Cola Corporation. Look for their social impact page at Coca-Cola Corporation. And so I have the English version up on my phone. This is kind of what it looks like. There's sort of this stairway with Coca-Cola at the top, okay? And if you find that page and scroll down, at the head it says people matter. And again, I did not pre-select this. This is the first idea I have as I walked in here about how to make this a little bit more concrete for everyone. And this is my first, what I found. People matter. We act in ways to improve people's lives, from our employees to those who touch our business to many communities we call home. Great. Now, if you scroll down, this looks, for all intents and purposes, like an NGO. First initiative, 18.5 million plus people's lives improved through access to safe drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene between 2010 and 2022. The next initiative, 6 million plus women enabled across 100 countries. And they talk there about their 5x20 program, providing women entrepreneurs with business training, access to financial services, and connections with peers and mentors. Next, we believe in empowering our people, creating equal opportunities, and building inclusion in the workplace and our communities through their DEI. And then we've got supporting communities to achieve more, especially in times of need. They talk specifically about challenging times, from natural disasters to COVID-19. Right? Certainly the kinds of conflicts we've been talking about would qualify there. Next, creating socioeconomic opportunities around the world. It is our social responsibility to help contribute to the well-being of both our direct employees and people across our communities to help enable a better shared future. And it goes on, right? The last one, dedicated to using our voice and position to support equality, justice, and universal values across various diverse groups. I didn't even try. I didn't even try. I was like, how cool would it be to be able to hold up this bottle of Coke and then say something about how Coca-Cola could come to bear on some of these conversations, right? So there are a couple of points that I want to make about this. Number one, the role of corporate responsibility has changed. I've been watching this personally. There are people who've been watching it for longer. I've been watching this since my sort of conversion to a business framework for 7 years. And the conversation that businesses are having now are fundamentally and foundationally different from the conversations they were having 7 years ago. There has been a battle for about 50 years where there's been sort of this idea that, is corporate responsibility something that corporations should be doing or not doing? Should they be engaged in the social sector, or should they not? And in 1970, Milton Friedman wrote a very famous piece that basically said the social responsibility of business is to maximize its profits. And that has been sort of what we think of as the dominant paradigm, but that paradigm has lost. Corporations see themselves as part of the solution, and they don't just bring money. This is just their CSR. Imagine if we were talking not only about sort of bridging some of these gaps, but now creating sustained community engagement through their opportunity to bring a factory to a location and employment that means, right? This is just their CSR stuff. This is just the bonus stuff that they're doing. So part of what we need to do is the same contextualization that we've been talking about with governments and NGOs. This is going to depend on the specific people that we're talking about and the specific community that they are living in. Because we need to look at the resources of the community, the businesses that are already in existence in that community, including the small ones and the big ones, right? The Coca-Colas, but also the women-owned, single family businesses. All of those contribute to this idea of rebuilding lives, which was one of the things that we talked about earlier in the conversation. We want people to be able to rebuild their lives. There are two time horizons. There's the immediate sort of trauma timeline where people have engaged significant disruption to their lives and are having to completely rebuild in a new context that is foreign to them. I think corporations can help with that. This is, again, one example. What we want to do is we want to look in the specific community that people have landed in and say, who's working here? What business is here? And bring them into conversation the same way you would an NGO or a government, and say, what is the context of your work here? And here is the context of the problem that we're facing. How can we work together to solve it? And just like it's people at the other end of the NGOs and the governments, it is people at the other end of the businesses, people with hearts, people who care, and people who've been fighting, frankly, for the last 50 years to win the battle about whether or not it's appropriate for them to use their business resources and not just their personal resources to bear on these problems. So that's one of the ways that I would say we can do that. And that is that's that immediate crisis thinking. And then there's a longer term thinking where we can look forward, look ahead and say, where are the places where conflict is sort of brewing? And what can we do to build stability there? And how can we bring the businesses that are operating in those contexts into the conversation and make religious freedom a part of their awareness? Because they're not all necessarily aware of this until someone brings it up, and then they're like, oh, wow, this is obviously relevant to me. Because they have as much interest, maybe even more, in stability in these local communities as anyone else. They want the stability and the ability to work and the ability to live and the ability to rely on their workforce just the same as everyone else wants a stable economy and a stable political situation. And so they have an interest in this on both time horizons, right? Now, one of the challenges, though, is that in some ways, this conversation has been diverging for 50 years. So civil society and government have been continuing the conversation about their social responsibility because it is core to their institutions. It's what we were founded on, right? And so we've continued a conversation for 50 years while the business sector has been arguing about whether or not they should be part of that conversation, right? And there are reasons for that. I don't want to demonize the people on the profit side. Even Milton Friedman believed that it would be best for society if business stuck to profit generation, right? Like in his heart of hearts, he genuinely believed that this would be better for everyone. Okay, so I don't want to demonize that conversation. But the truth is that the world has shifted now, and most major players, everyone recognize that business is now expected to be a part of the solution, and that involves being engaged in conversations like this one. The challenge is the language is very different. So Coca-Cola looks like an NGO when you look at this page, but if you talk to the corporate executives at Coca-Cola,
they are using a different set of terms, they're using different language, they're using different incentive structures, and so we can miss each other the same way that when you bring two different religions in the conversation, they can miss each other because they're using different terms and different ideas and different frameworks. So what I'm trying to do here is sort of bring into sort of a concrete community level view of what I talked about yesterday in terms of what the business sector can bring to this conversation. And it's not just money. And we also need to not be thinking about them just as big, well-funded NGOs, right? Which in some cases they actually are. But they also have their own set of structures and incentives, just like civil society organizations and NGOs have a different funding structure than governments do, and different constituencies than governments do. Businesses just like that. They have their own constituents. They are going to be interested in their customers. They're going to be interested in their shareholders. And then they're going to be interested in their employees and their communities and some of these other things. So understanding the way that they're thinking about the same citizens that we talk about, but they have different frameworks. And so I think part of the work of the Corporate Council is to bring that conversation together and to be sort of a translator and a bridge so that we can have the conversation in a way that actually leads to working solutions. But again, we can't just sort of, as I did yesterday, sort of wave our hands and say, you know, we'll involve corporations, right? This is the same context-dependent work that we've been talking about all morning, where we have to identify the specific context. In the case of displaced people, we need to understand what skills were they able to use before they were displaced? What certifications did they have? What education did they have? Now, what companies are operating either in the context they've moved to or globally that need those skills, and how do we connect them? And then on the political side, how do we make it possible for them to recertify in a new country or context so that they can use the skills that they have so they don't end up underemployed, right? The worst thing for everyone in the economy, everyone, is to have, right, doctors and lawyers digging ditches. Now, digging ditches is good work. It's honest work, and it is worthy, and it should be paid appropriately, and that is a beautiful thing. But if we are underemploying people, we're also under-supporting their families and underdeveloping their economies. So we want to make sure that people are fully employed, not just employed, not just having a shelter over their heads until they move on to the next place, but able to rebuild their lives in a way that is sustainable, which requires more than the support that NGOs can give. That is emergency support, that is emergency aid, it bridges those gaps, and it is essential. What we're trying to get everyone to is the ability to support themselves and rebuild their lives in the economy. And so we need to bring those players to bear. So that's maybe sort of my operational spiel on what this looks like on the ground. And I hope that that's helpful in bringing some context to the idea behind what we're trying to do on the Corporate Council.
I think it's very helpful. And then we would need the Corporate Council's help in being the translator and helping to shape, the right narrative and messaging for the corporate.
I think one of the things that Simran did so beautifully, and then I'm going to hand the microphone to Ben, one of the things that Simran did so beautifully is that he demonstrated, we're meeting here in Berlin, and so he brought two major corporate players in Berlin to the table, right? I mean, I think that's kind of an example of what this can look like, is finding the right people and bringing them, like, literally to the table. So, Ben, here you are at the table. I'm going to hand you.
Thank you for finding and bringing us to the table. And it is actually a fascinating learning experience, and the opportunity that sparks within us as we're talking and listening and synthesizing what we're learning is even more exciting and validating for why we're here. So, people, I love talking after Eva because it becomes very clear. Nazira, am I saying it right? You talked about people are the religion. Corporations develop people. This aspect of what corporates bring, this will be another version of what Ava was mentioning. It may not be what you're expecting, but to answer Greg's question, what can corporations bring to this discussion? What should you expect them to? What I've found, and what we've spoken on a little bit so far, corporations are composed of humans, people. They begin and end with people. Leaders are developed. They are paid and incentivized to be part of those Coca-Cola CSR programs. They learn these corporate languages, but they don't always stay in that corporation. They're also members, as people are multidimensional, of societies. They have their own cultures, they have their own religions. Mature, faith-friendly companies enable those leaders that they're developing, those corporate skilled folks, to interface in new ways with their personal lives, with their civil societies, with their churches, and then interface with others. This is where those coalitions that we spoke about yesterday come to. We can start to contribute in those ways in terms of people. I'll give an example. The United Nations Advisory Body on AI, on artificial intelligence, in March 2024 this year, put out a call for contributions. So what did we do is the AI and Faith group, which is composed of folks, leaders who have been developed from corporations, IBM, Meta, Microsoft, SAP, in addition to academia, we submitted a contribution that's now been published this past month with the UN Advisory Report on AI. This is a significant contribution for people of faith on the topic of AI. It covers a set of broad topics, but specifically, it gives the importance of, and use the word shared values. I heard this all week. Shared values from having multiple faith perspectives bearing on the development of AI. This is important. It gives us the opportunity because government, and so businesses are beholden to regulations from governments. Oh, especially these days when it comes to what are we doing good in the world? In just the CSR departments, but now we have the pressures from the government and customer stakeholders. Talent wants to work for companies that are purpose-driven. So, with this, October 27th, this month, the UN Advisory Body will convene, and it will come for the first time with that faith framework on AI embedded. We were able to bring that because of the leaders that are developed from business. We contributed this. That's an example of the contribution we put in, and is already in motion. What does that mean that we can do? What should be expected? Not just the money. The economic opportunities, and I'll emphasize the labor market, is a major corporate driver to employ the skilled folks. People, when it comes to AI, are the beginning and the end of it, just like they are in any system. It seemed like a big black box. I wear this little pin. It's a black pin. Someone asked me about it. I can't explain it yet. I wear it because it's a symbol for me of the black box. And we're all like, ooh, AI is fascinating and weird, scary. And Nazuma had an amazing perspective on this, where who is making my decisions when I make my itinerary in Berlin? And I'm tracing it. He said, if you don't mind me saying, I asked Google, I asked ChatGPT, and I get this AI itinerary, what I should be doing, knowing full well that there are some algorithms that corporations have decided about me that they will be trying to find. Whether they're true or not. They will be able to do this better, the better we have faith-friendly, mature organizations within companies. And as they understand about to interface with you, we'll be able to do that. How can they interface? I'm going to go back to the 6 principles that you heard me say yesterday. Fairness, accountability, transparency, safety, security, sustainability. Do you hear the principles of religious freedom in those 6 AI principles?
Yes.
Then come to Washington, D.C. on October 23rd for the Responsible AI Governance Conference. You won't have time, probably, but we will be there, the businesses. And we'll be there again because we have a seat at the governing body for the UN Advisory Board, which is convening on October 27th. Or in San Francisco on November 1st. Those are just some examples of how the business people, not just representing one corporation, but the talent that has been developed from them who are now identifying, we need to move this forward and we identify with this. That's the corporate, I believe that's the spirit of the corporate coalition, the corporate council that we're doing here. And I believe that's the best thing that we want to leave with you that we can and should be bringing.
Great. Thank you. I look forward to seeing how it develops, the whole concept, and what you guys, bring, what you guys do with it. So I'm excited about it. Thank you.
Well,
Okay.
any quick responses?
Yeah, I'm gonna throw some things out. I applaud all this, and I agree. I also want to play devil's advocate just a little bit. In the name of good strategic thinking. So there's no political opinions here, but I'm going to try and describe some feelings, hopefully accurately, or things that are out there. First, back to Milton Friedman and keeping the main thing. It's not just about profits, but it's about efficiencies, right? So here's the story. My dad, Greg referenced him, used to be president of World Vision. And 3 months after the genocide in Rwanda, which began April 6, 1994, he's out in the bush and trying to get World Vision programs started. And he sees Coca-Cola being delivered because they figured out how to get there. And their driving goal was a Coca-Cola within arm's length of everybody on the planet. That was their vision at the time. And profit maximizing, but there was also an efficiency that we can learn from in terms of how to do this. I don't know if we're there yet, and I think the AI thing could be a huge part of that. So in the Marine Corps, we would say time, space, and logistics. You gotta do TSNL if you're gonna be effective, you're gonna be creative and all those kinds of things. So I don't know what I'm just trying to throw some things out there about the other attributes the business brings to the table beyond the CSR. Now let me say something more perhaps contentious. I think many people in the majority of the world don't care about CSR. And I think that there is a danger, and I'm not saying this is you at all, but I think there's a danger that American corporations with some of this CSR stuff or LGBTQ rights will be received very poorly in the majority of the world if you lead with that. And that's how democratic administrations are received often. And I'm not just saying this because I'm more of a centrist. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this around the world. You're jamming it down our throats. And that's not to say it's the wrong thing to do, it's how you do it. And corporations can be identified with that in the West. And I think that's something that we would need to think about. Even in America, there's pushback on, quote unquote, DEI. There's noble principles, but how does it look and all that kind of stuff. What I'm getting at is this is a tremendous resource, but we need to think about the how it is received and perceived in the majority world, such that it is not sunk before it begins because of some of these feelings that I've experienced in populations around the world. And then back to the first point, there's a lot to learn with the TSNL about efficiencies that businesses can teach us, and AI even more so because we don't need to even meet on some of this stuff. Hopefully that's not offensive in any way, but I'm just trying to throw some things out there.
Thank you. It's a good point. Because we see like Uganda. Ghana, I don't know if John is in this story, but there's a lot of legislation that's being driven in some of these countries in response to some of that being
And not the
shoved.
legislation is right, but it's a
Right, I know.
response too.
And so that's real, and we need to be aware of it, because there's responses all throughout the individual world to what they view the West shoving down their throats right now.
Well, then, yeah, India, I don't know what the percentage is, it's like 1% or something, and there's a law that corporations, indigenous corporations have to spend 1% of their profits on CSR. And so Brian Graham was talking about it, I'm very like, well, tell them like, hey, so what you can do with it, and they're from, and the idea is to get them to use use that to promote pluralism. So that doesn't exist in the US, but the countries that get it, instead of going, yeah, you owe it to society.
It's similar than Paul.
It's a very complicated conversation, and we really have to resist the urge to, make an academic conversation. Ava's done that. She, with no glory on the table, she spent 7 years studying this, and we have to resist the urge to simplify. I'm interested, as a corporate guy, I'm interested in what can work, and what can work for the movement. The reason I've been in this in the last 15 years is because it's not to advocate for seats. I wanted to understand how we can grow the movement, so how we all support each other better. And Greg has called again and again for us to find ways to bring corporations to the table. So the first question with this corporate council rule was, how is it possible, and if so, how? And many have tried and failed. I've heard it up and down the movement. Corporations aren't coming, corporations aren't interested. So that's not true. That's the first myth busted. One of the things you might not have mentioned as eloquently is the executives. You talk about employees, you talk about profit, you talk about the corporation. But the corporation is made up of executives who have intrinsic motivations, and sometimes that motivation is fake. Usually it's career, usually it's personal profile. And I'll talk about that for like 90 seconds and then give it back. In addition to the T company, our sister company was the largest private military contractor in the US. I was the head of corporate strategy. What does that look like? 4,000 armed officers and walking distance from the White House. Most like DC events where people in the middle of it. Armed officers in 350 US cities and top secret cleared Americans in 120 countries. And I got to think through our corporate strategy. And I was responsible for internal M&A. And so I got pitched and pitched and pitched on things we should do. The New York Times did a front page article on us asking, how could you, religious whatever, secure so much of our national infrastructure? And they asked the Department of Justice, and the gentleman said, well, last time I checked, we have religious freedom in this country, so I don't understand the question. That was in the front page article in 2004. So this was part of our ethos. And we got pitched on deploying our corporate capacity over and over and over again. And what I realized is there's 4 things. It has to be good for me. It has to be good for you, the NGO, the donor, the interested party. It has to be good for the company, and it has to be good for society. And society includes my religion, your religion, the country, the American ideal, etc. If one of those 4 was missing, I could never, not once, get a pitch through a corporate partnership. The one that we didn't talk about as much is the interest of the executive approving that when you raise a lot of money from some of the biggest companies in the world to push religious freedom into the environment. So, one of the top 5 largest companies in the world sent one of their senior executives to one of our events. And I asked her, how do we get into your philanthropic process? Because you give billions a year, and you obviously give billions in a way that have tax advantages. You also do it in a way that furthers your CSR profile, et cetera, et cetera. How do we get in? And she said, oh, Simran, it takes. So I said, at Yogi, you just give 5 million a year. It's not much compared to you. How do you know money? Oh, Simran, it will take years. I mean, there's basically will take 3 to 5 years. After one of these events, she pulled me aside and she said, Simran, I feel like an imposter, and you haven't given me a proposal that I can act on so I can unlock my philanthropic capacity and bring my network, then rally faith interested people in these corporations, and she wanted to rally our corporate philanthropic network to come to the table. The next question I get as the chair of the corporate council is, well, Simran, why haven't you raised the money? Like, where the heck is it? Everybody's asking, is this even real? It is real. It's so real because everyone is saying yes. I haven't gotten a no yet, but it requires a tremendous elegance. Each one of those corporations is its own ecosystem. There is thousands of people in there who've made a living you know, the way that foreign ministry might have its, you know, might be competing ambassadors or competing for promotions. It is vicious in there. And we have to be so elegant, and I could immediately deploy 50 people into the corporate philanthropic network to try and bring them to the table here, and they would be very, very busy. It's not easy, but it's all there. And what we have to figure out with our other corporate partners is how do we do this elegantly in a way where we're still here next year, and the year after, and in 5 years, and in 10 years, and we bring, I would say, at least dozens of major household names corporations to the table. Once we have those, they will fight for us. They will almost need to be here. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. You know, we're hearing several things here. We talk about values, AI, the corporate structure, the corporate need. One of the things with the Global Peace Foundation that we really are successful at is really this values-based peace building. And then we brought up Greg, Uganda, and in fact, there were 3 components that we developed that I was able to present in Uganda and Kenya that really speaks to the core of the community, and that is family, faith, and freedom. So our convening was based on those 3 components. When you want to drive change or transformation, you always have to look at the individual and where they come from. So family, and especially throughout Africa, we're working with, family is critical. Faith is another major component. And then the freedom to live the way they want to live. And so when we put those together, we're able to address some of the issues. And we specifically went to Uganda because when you mentioned earlier about the LGBT issue in Uganda, they passed legislation that was draconian. I mean, basically, you'd be executed. They have a law that allows homosexuals to be executed if they're found caught with a minor. And there are other degrees of things that happen. And as a result of that, the governments, the world governments, pulled all their funding. The United States, the UN pulled the funding out of Uganda. Not only did they pull the funding out of the social programs in Uganda, but they went in and took all their product. They took the vehicles that they used, that they were using to go out to address STDs and healthcare issues. They took their computers. They went in and literally took everything and left them with nothing. So the Ugandans are saying, what do? We said, well, first of all, when you operate in this space, if we want to talk about policy, we have to make sure that everyone can be at the table. And that's the great thing about the Earth Secretariat and the development of the roundtables, because everyone comes to the table. But the values is really the critical piece here, is that when we can find those values that bring everyone together, and in Africa, Uganda, and Kenya, this family, faith, and freedom are really the key components. And when you talk about corporations, Manu Chandara with Comcraft Corporation is one of our major sponsors of the Global Peace Foundation and our work in Africa. It's Nairobian, multi-billionaire. The work that he does, he supports a lot of our work because he understands the values that are common, that bring civil society together. It's not about going against LGBT or any other issues. It's about how do we protect what we have for our families, for our communities. So when we're looking at how do we move this to the next level, I agree with Ben and others that values is the thing that brings us together. Corporations have the funding, the strategy, and really corporations themselves could be looking at internally where you have employees that want to support such an effort. So there could be funding that takes place with employee funding, that employees match, and corporation can match what employees contribute. There are those kinds of tools out there. So how do we take all of that and move that into this space of what we're doing right now? And how do we bring that kind of funding? So when you come to an Earth Secretariat or Earth Roundtable, and you know that you've got your, and some of us, we have to understand, as a business, you can ask your business who says, look, we will match when you're doing programs, volunteer programs, or nonprofit, are you working for helping a nonprofit? We'll sponsor up to 50% of whatever you donate. So then you get them registered, and then when you come to one of our events here, the round table, someone say, I'm gonna give so much money, then it's matched by the corporation that just brings in extra dollars. So we have to be thinking outside the box and saying, how can we as individuals and then collectively bring in the resources so that we can move this movement to the next level? Otherwise, we're always gonna stay on this platform.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering, I love that word elegance. And I want to draw maybe the 3D out a little bit more on that to understand, like, what does that look like? I mean, it sounds a bit like this reference that I'm running in my mind in a lot of different contexts, but that I work in, but Oliver Wendell Holmes once referred to the simplicity on the far side of complexity, and then that was your first point. It's really complicated. You know, you can't go in. You know, there's so many things. Yeah, you're giving me this kind of simplicity, but you don't understand complexity. They're going to dismiss you out of here, especially corporate types, right? Because they're busy people. They're smart. They don't have a lot of time. You know, you got an elevator ride to make your point, right? And you got to get in there and hook on them. And then if you do that, they'll run with it, right? I'll tell you a story later about an experience I had along that line. But independent of that, my own experience, I mean, what is that? Can I just draw you out a little bit more on, like, what does that look like? Because that affects the approach, right? You can't come in and say, like, I'm this bleeding heart, you know, nonprofit guy, you know, talking about these values and so on. So how does that work? Just draw you out on that theme, elegance.
So it's not true you don't have an elevator. That's what you do when you have on a cold call. In a prepared environment, you can get things. You can get a student sponsorship, but you have to prepare the battlefield. I'm from a military contractor. You have to prepare the battlefield. I stake my reputation with these two. I'm bringing them here. If this had been weird, they're like, you're awesome, and we're so busy. And now I think they're saying, we're all in. Without bringing them here, that wouldn't have been possible. So thank you, Link, TRT, Earthsec. And we talked about it, how do you get these stories out into the world? We are, and I mean the worst storytellers. Don't tell me any of our orgs are doing a good job. I just don't want to. I'm not here to congratulate each other on great arts and great work. I just want it to work. And what we talk about affects billions of people. And if any of our social media posts get a few thousand likes, we think it's a success. These stories, every one of these stories should go viral if we tell them correctly. And then the corporations beg us to the table. You're not in a situation now, you're out there in Michigan trying really hard and did I get it? They are the one thing from the bottoms of their hearts. If their eyes sparkle, which many eyes do, from the bottoms of their hearts, they want to talk to us. Call me out if I got that wrong. Please first. Good call.
I think that's absolutely right, and they're people and their eyes sparkle, but so many times we're not speaking their language, so we can't help them have their eyes sparkle. And for me, that's been the biggest thing. So I told you yesterday, my training is all in civil society. My master's degree is in nonprofit management. My PhD is in policy analysis and public management, right? I'm a government nonprofit, really. I got plopped into a business school, and once I decided that I wanted to learn the language of my colleagues in the business school, it took me 5 years to be able to hold this conversation with my colleagues in the same building because they spoke business and I spoke civil society. And so for me, there's not just like getting the time and getting in the door and being able to sort of appeal to the heart, but if we appeal to them like they're an NGO because they look like an NGO, we're gonna miss. But we have the skills to approach them. You just sort of approach them like a foreign government, right? You do the same kind of research that you would do, but you have to understand their environment and the way that they speak and the incentive structures that they have, and understanding how to talk about what we talk about with each other with them requires some additional effort, some additional language.
So it's both access and then also language. And then every issue, every problem in the world is going to the same companies, asking for the same things, right? And these are innovators, and they live in a world of competition. And so if we sound like everyone else, just, fill in the issue, that's not gonna gain traction. So part of what we need to be able to do is say, here's how you can uniquely provide value in this space. This is how you can have, in their language, a competitive advantage at solving this problem, because we know who you are and we know what you do. This is not about corporate money. This is about corporate capacity. And I think that's one of the points that is important to draw out. I don't see this being a devil's advocate at all. I think it's contributing to the conversation, saying if all we're thinking is donate money so that we can do what we do, we're already sunk, right? We need to understand these businesses, how they operate, why they are successful, and their competitors, how their competitors are different from them, and why the way that they're different helps us better than anyone else can. That competitive language and understanding kind of what the words are even that they use, that's going to be part of how, not only when we bring them to the table, that's how we're going to be able to make things move forward.
What does the elegance look like? Entrepreneurial span in an organism, in a company. Big tech, I'll speak from experience. You typically have a small or large entrepreneurial span beside your day job. Bring strategic initiatives according to the clout that you have with your management, the senior management, for new initiatives. That will bring the business forward. That should be expected in what you do. Do you bring religious freedom, or do you bring some other market? What is the business value for the time for that pitch, right? So one example for our journey was I gave an executive 3 options. You can become the executive sponsor, you can tolerate this, or you can tell us to stop doing this. So that they had some agency, right? Respect a new person. And executives love options. And we got all 3 of those responses from different folks. We got some who said, tolerate, some said, get away from this, stop doing this. And then we had someone who says, I will adopt this, and I will put budget towards it. So you shop that around in the spare entrepreneurial time at the beginning, on the side of your day job, because you have a vision for the future. Turns out there's others who have that too, and companies incentivize folks to bring strategic initiatives, not just nice to have. This is strategic because it will have these X consequences. So that language is helpful, and the elegance comes also from what has been done before in other corporations. We use that persuasively to close deals with our executives to say, this is how it was done in our competitor. We can do this as well, and we should, and here are the results. So that's helpful. Linking to research that's been done was helpful. But then over time, as we get official funding, official recognition, and executive sponsorship, hundreds of people become contributing members to this. Chapters are built, and we have now a seat at the executive board, the corporate executive board table. And me personally, I'm sitting next to the executive board members of SAP, and they're asking, what do we need to do here? And then the investor relations head asks, the investor wants to know our maturity on religious freedom. Give us the answer. Hey, that's great. That talks about value, but we don't get there unless we actually spend the time first to go through the so it's a business case scenario with someone's entrepreneurial span. Then it gets awarded. Good news, other corporations, the people at corporations have gone through this process, and in the last 12 months we published the playbook, referenced it yesterday. Google, Accenture, my counterparts at these companies have said, this is what it took for us to do this, these are the best practices, and we put those steps through based on our own cases. So that becomes a way that can be helpful. So you asked for examples of elegance there, I would go there, but it gets even further than that, because that just starts internal. Then we start talking about market development, and we get into the strategic conversation and crisis management for Hamas Israel crisis, our COO and Chief People Officer at SAP, just in the last 11 months, publicly called us out, said thank you for making it easy for us to manage this crisis internally, but also externally, because that was very difficult for us to do. We didn't have the communication toolkit for before. And then just keeps building. That is a slow and careful process, and we make lots of mistakes before then, and it takes a lot of courage on the side of the day jobs to do that. People don't have time, executives get it.
Thank you. All right, we have about a half an hour left. That was great. And again, I look forward to what comes out of the work council as you guys keep working on it. So thank you. We have about 30 minutes left, and I want to call on our other co-sponsors and see what kind of thoughts you have. Being here yesterday and hearing part of the discussions today, which has been great. Sheikna, we have Sheikna, then we have Eric and Rachel, I think. So Sheikna, any thoughts you have to contribute on this discussion?
Yeah.
How we can develop these plans and increase our effectiveness of
My bad luck brought me just in the last minute and I felt I'm a boomer. So I think we need to have more time with those tech companies and AI first we need to learn to know. So I am a president now for a commission of the civil society and AI ethics in UK. So, and we've been building with Vatican and the leadership of the Pope Francis, some kind of ethics for AI. But I always like to be in a position of reminder of ethics, not, pushing or making it as a lot legal. It's just reminding those who work in AI about ethics. So that's something else. But for our field as a religion freedom, I think we need to make like religion freedom for dummies, because the concept has been damaged in the past and need to be our new vision for religion freedom for all. It's like adopting the language of our time. We all come to this meeting, not because we have time, but we make time and we prioritize this meeting because it's so important for us and for the future generations. So a lot of more than using religion, because they use it to encourage side against side, or community against community, or majority against minority. So how we can really be humble and bring small book that's written by all of us as one family, to endorse it to everybody by the language who will accept it. How we can practice the smart ideas, that we don't need to repeat them again and again. How we can change to the Chatham House rule, think tanks. When we really, because I'm coming from Muslim world and coming from Middle East and Africa, and there's a long walk to freedom of religion. But it started from this organization. When a creative minority meet, I think they will change the history, as Toynbee said. It's all about creative minority. So guys, each one of us should, I 100% believe, no one will fly here. You're looking for entertainment, or you don't have time to spend his time somewhere else. But we came here because we believe in this. We believe in this work, and it's a long journey, as I said yesterday. is not a machine or a job. It's live machine. You do it if you're an engineer, you do it as a neighbor, you do it as a father, you do it as a mother, you do it as a friend, you do it in your life. So I think we should do simple things to be easy to marketing, too easy for those we can engage with them to support. Even when we ask them for support, we're not asking them to support us. We're asking them to support themselves. Because freedom of religion, it's about you. It's not about me. It's about us as a human family. But I'm still a boomer, and I will need more time with AI. Thank you.
It's a great point. I like that frame. It's about them and we're asking them to support themselves. Rachel? There you are. And then Aaron. Any thoughts you'd have, any reflections on the conversation we had here?
Many thoughts, always many thoughts. I'm always just thinking about who's not in the room and how can we hold ourselves accountable to make sure that as we grow a movement, we don't inadvertently become gatekeepers. So people don't feel like to participate in this movement, they have to pay a certain amount or look a certain way or, attend certain events. That's what's really on my mind. I think that the international religious freedom movement, it's exploded in the last 5 years. Certainly, it's been a long social movement for 35 years in the US, longer still for many. I recognize I'm in a room with religious freedom giants who've devoted their lives and careers to this. So I just think if you're gonna get corporations involved, one way is start at the top. If you wanna get media involved, you can start at the top. Or you could just flip this on its head and think, at every conference we should see 50 people we've never seen before, instead of the same 50 people we always see. And that's how you build a movement. And if those 50 people also include corporations, big and small, because we don't just want the big corporations, you don't just want Coca-Cola, you also want the small corporation that, even though maybe their financial contribution is small, it's gonna last forever. They're gonna build a company around the vision of religious freedom. So I think just really focusing on that, and I understand the importance of gathering, like here in Berlin, but maybe this is just my own bias. Like I get a little weary of meetings and conferences in my own schedule. This is not even commentary necessarily about what we're doing here today, but there's just so many conferences and so many meetings, and we all go to them, and we all care about these issues, but can we translate those meetings into real action? So one thing we could do tangibly for business and for media is scale these down and have them on a smaller basis in unusual places in the United States. We don't have to travel internationally to talk about international religious freedom. We did a symposium in Salt Lake City, Utah. We're gonna do a symposium next year in Montana. We're gonna do doing the roundtable we launched in Florida, Greg, under your leadership. That's exactly what I think we need to do. But it doesn't even need to be a roundtable. To the Sheikh's point, it can be, come talk about international religious freedom. If you're a business, come. If you're media, come. You can get amazing conversations from just small gatherings across the United States at a county level, at a city level. Once you do that 2 years in a row, you have an ally the rest of your life. So we are all from different places. Starting where we are is gonna be more economically efficient, and it will maximize your influence. I live in Manhattan. There's a lot of religious freedom things happening there, but I don't know that those people I see in Manhattan are necessarily the people that we all see at the Earth Summit or at the Ministerial. So I can commit to that. I can go gather all my local media contacts in Manhattan. That takes the movement forward. So if all of us in our kind of respective spheres, yes, we're thinking about the larger movement, the 10,000 foot level, how do we get the big drivers, the big money, the big corporations, but also let's just start where we are and take advantage of a more localized approach in London, in Dubai, in Salt Lake City, wherever you're from, right? In your hometowns should know what you're doing and what it's about. And if we each did that, I don't even know that it has to be really coordinated under kind of like a broader organization that's managing that. I think we could all just do it and then report back, or bring one of those local contacts to the Berlin Ministerial, or like next year in the Ministerial. Bring a corporation from your hometown, bring a media contact from your hometown, let it start to grow organically in those ways as well. I think becomes really crucial. So I don't know if that's really clear, but like that's one commitment I'm gonna make. It's just every time I come back to these meetings, I think my goal will be, can I either bring someone new who's never been to a religious freedom anything, or can we make sure that we're thinking about somewhere new, not the usual suspects, so that we're actually growing a social movement. And this is not a criticism, but we don't want to create a social club. We don't want international religious freedom to feel like an exclusive club that like you can't get into. Barriers to entry are the major systematic challenge to economic growth, so let's not create any barriers to entry as we try and build a movement.
Rachel, bring the corporate from your hometown to the next one.
Well, that's my commitment. That's what I'm saying. I'm gonna bring.
That's fascinating.
Bring the
Is
new
that-
context.
Do you know somebody that you would call up and say, come here? That would be interesting.
I think we all.
The downside, you say, you come to such a club, but carefully, it sounds like a great suggestion just to see what responses you can get. If you feel like you're prepared with the other ways to do that, I just love what you said. I interrupted you, but the moderator's giving me permission to interrupt.
Thank you, Rachel. Eric?
Well, yeah, I believe I'm gonna start, because what I wanted to say, the gentleman said it. So I love the concept of religious freedom for dummies. And so we are not a social club, but here we are people who are like familiar with religious freedom, at least for some of them for 100 years, and some of us less, but whatever, we are familiar with it. But we are trying to reach out to people who are much less familiar. And I remember a long time ago meeting with a bishop, an Episcopal bishop from California, and telling me, oh, you do religious freedom. I thought it was something for the far-right conservative evangelicals. And I said, oh, that's your vision of religious freedom, you know? And of course, first of all, that's not what I am, and that's not what religious freedom is at all. And I think we have made a lot of progress in that direction to make religious freedom something which is non-partisan, which is for all. Nevertheless, the vision of religious freedom is not sexy, if I may use that word, you know. And I think the question is now, how do we make religious freedom sexy? And it all goes to marketing. We are reaching out to people who do not have the same concern, or maybe they have, but they don't know because they are not in that field. And for 2 donors potential from corporates that will come here, we may have 50 that will not be able to come, or at least not now, and we need to reach out to them for them to be able to join the table. So I believe that the effort on marketing is key. But I also think that it's not necessarily a super expensive effort. Why? Because we are working with people on the ground. And I believe we have millions of stories like the one that is, yesterday we were just an example, there was this pastor from Uzbekistan talking about his friend, the imam from Uzbekistan, and vice versa. That's a nice story, which is can talk to anyone, everywhere. And that kind of story, we have a lot, because we have people on the ground, we have roundtables with civil society, and activists who know that story. So if we get these stories by digging, by being in touch with them, and ask them to film them, to interview the people, to make documentation, then we just need a team, centralized team of people who know how to transform this raw documentation of stories into the various sectors that we want to reach out to. Meaning that it's not the same if you talk to corporates. And even in corporates, you don't address one company like you will have another. So you need an expert who knows how to do that and change the narrative of, but with the same film, you can do like 3, 4, 10 different formats that will speak to the donor we want to speak with. So my only thing is, I think the missing ingredient, we have done a lot. It became a movement, even if not a mass movement, but we still need to increase the marketing aspect and invest on it much more, because that is what will bring more money and create a virtuous cycle of investing money for getting more money, for doing more good things, etc., etc.
You should join the media council.
Thank you.
I couldn't agree more about the religious freedom for dummies. I think that it's such a complex issue. It's a challenge to onboard people. I really want to strongly agree with most of what Rachel said and disagree on one key point. This can be very social clubby. As a person who had 20 years of experience in a related movement, I feel like it took me a really long time, kind of a ridiculously long time to break it. I mean, Charlie's known me since I was a teenager. Very related movement. And yet, we can't do it as this group. The problems that we are addressing are way too big to be fixed by the people sitting in this room. And so it's not just a nice thing to expand the movement. This is a necessity. This is something, if we are actually going to achieve these goals that we keep talking about when we gather together, we have to expand this movement. And she said that we should bring people that have never been to a religious freedom movement thing before. I disagree. I think that it's too overwhelming for people to come in completely fresh. I have spent the last 2.5 weeks, all day, every day, interviewing fellowship candidates. And I might get emotional because they are emotional. Seeing the level of desperation that they have in their faces to have an impact in this movement, how eager they are for this opportunity to serve. They're not getting paid a dime. It's going to cost them money in textbooks. But they are eager, they're desperate, they're begging me to give 10 to 15 hours a week to have an opportunity to be involved in this movement. Like, they just want a foot in this door. And these are people who have been working in this movement for 10 years already on average. And so it's about creating what I've called it like a sales funnel. It's taking people who are at that next level and inviting them into the circle. And then it's taking people who are aware of religious freedom and activating them. And it's taking people who have never heard about religious freedom and educating them. It's casting a wide net and getting more and more people kind of up the funnel until we can no longer have these meetings in a room of this size. And these meetings can no longer occur geographically in any space because there are so many people who are desperate to be here that we can decentralize the information. We can decentralize the access to people and resources so that it's truly a global mass movement. I think that's what we need. And having religious freedom for dummies is something that we talk a lot about because it's so complex. I mean, again, I'm in these interviews and I'm talking to people, and I've been doing this for a while, and it's like, okay, my first interview of the day, and you're in Sri Lanka, and now I remind you, like, I have to remember, like, who's the majority and who's the minority, and it's complicated. We have 200 different countries and 200 different contexts, and we have to figure out ways. We have an academic council. I think we need a council to take the academics and put it into action. Maybe that's the media council, because we have so much information, and in my thinking, as a non-academic, just a lowly master's degree, but is that the academia is like crude oil, and we need to refine it into gasoline that can go somewhere. We need to take these stacks. Cole Durham produces these stacks of information, and I'm like, that's great. Give me the talking points. We need to put that into social media so it can get into the hands of the people, and then the people can communicate that information to the decision makers. So I'm all about that religious freedom for dummies. We've got to expand the movement. We've got to get rid of the social clubby, gatekeeper kind of bottlenecks that we have so that we can really become a mass movement.
Thank you. We have Shayna and we have Suzanne, 2 comments. Either way, we can go over them ladies first.
I want to just say one comment on the fundraising, because our nonprofit is kind of a hybrid. We're a 501c3, so we get public funding, but we also give grants and money away. But it's different nowadays on how you do this and how your donors are expecting to be treated. There's a return on investment that they insist on seeing after their money is spent. They need to have reporting and measurabilities. They want to know the impact. Then there's a cultivation to be able to repeat the cycle of the fundraising. If that is not happening, they think you are using them for their money, they will never give you money again. And if you do that, they come back and they give more. So that's really important. One thing that I think that I've seen throughout the week here, and I'm going to say this with all due respect because I was completely unaware. We are on the precipice of our next genocide to be happening in Armenia. The world is not paying attention. I am seeing this amazing group of capable, knowledgeable experts in their fields, whether it's government, whether it's academia, whether it's civil society, whether it's media. I am seeing people that care deeply about religious freedom. And if it's not this first Christian nation in the world that was founded in 301 AD, it's going to be the next nation or the next religion. But Azerbaijan and Turkey are saying publicly on a daily basis, they've already ethnically cleansed 120,000 Christians a year ago on September 19, 2023, from Artsakh and Nagorno-Karabakh. No one is hearing it. There is an active suppression, social media, everywhere, media, to not talk about this. I can tell you I personally experienced it. My founder did a program with one of the witnesses. I can't find it on YouTube. I can't find it on any social media channel, yet it was posted there. This is an active campaign. If we as a collective group could come out and speak about this, I truly think for the first time, a movement like this, first time in my career dealing with this, I think we have an opportunity to stop a genocide and religious freedom violations and human rights violations any further. So I'm just going to put that out there on the table. That's one thing I feel like we've missed hitting this time, and time is of the essence. But this is an amazing collective here. And I'm going to leave on one thing. Our founder met with Billy Graham before he passed away. And he asked him who was going to be the next Martin Luther King, who was going to come in and be able to do things. And Billy Graham said there will no longer be a person that heads up a movement. I am going to have a mosaic of people from all walks of life, from all religions, from all areas of the world, and all areas of business that will come together. That mosaic will be lockstep, intertwining and interlocking to move forward. So no one person ever gets the glory anymore. It's God that gets the glory. So that is really important here. I feel like all of us can do something right now. So I just want to challenge you all to maybe take that up as one of the initiatives and do something to stop from reacting and responding to the genocide and persecution.
Thank you. Shayna.
Anyway, thank you very much. It's really getting more interesting. But we all have experience. In 2001, the day of September 11, I was in California in my house when someone called me from New York at 6 o'clock in the morning about the first flight that happened, crashed in the building. Then he called me again, and I said, well, that's big. So I drove my car to Hamza Yusuf. We're working together at that time. We have a small institute called Zaytuna Institute. It was not a college. So we went together, both me and him, after we watched the tragedy, and was both visited paradigm shifts. Our community, Muslim community, will face challenges. So first we went to borders, and we look at what's there about Islam. So we find it's just exactly confirming Muslims that extremism. Every book there is just confirming the exact confirmation. So we decided to call the producer of Islam for Dummies. So that time there's no Islam for Dummies. There is a lot of other books for Dummies, but no Islam for Dummies. We called him and we told him, if you want sponsors, we'll get sponsors for it. And they did. The next week, he was tired working it with some professional people. But the next week, we fly both of us in the first flight that's been authorized to fly from California to Washington, D.C. to meet with President Bush. So we went to White House, to executive office. We met the president. And we brought him 7 points about Islam. And we correct him, even that time they called the operation in Afghanistan infinitive justice. We said, no, man, infinitive justice is just for God. So we don't want America to be seen as a God, so that everybody will fight you. They said, oh, we don't have theologian in Pentagon. That's the word exactly used. So sorry for that, we will change it. They changed it to freedom, something else, they changed the operation name. So we said to him, Islam has been hijacked. But we will fight those who hijacked our religion. And we will do our best. So we start working from that moment. We went back to California. We did the program for FBI, because we need to educate the law enforcement about what is Islam exactly. So then now, this day I'm sitting here, we have the biggest, the largest conference in the Middle East for religion freedom, and it's Abu Dhabi Forum for Peace. We've been able to correct 58 concepts in Islam being wrong interpreted, now adopted by many countries. We have a large document, Mecca Declaration, Marrakech Declaration. We have so many declarations that explain the Islam in 21st century. We have the first accredited college in California, Zaytuna College. The students of Zaytuna, they go now to Harvard, other places to study. So this is a long journey. It has a lot of challenges. But when you have the brilliant ideas, you have the right people, you have the sincere ones, don't worry. It's just a matter of time. So freedom of religion, it's the important obligation for our time. Freedom of religion, it will save from the next genocide in Sahel, what I know Africa very well, and in the Middle East. So I'm telling you, we need to do a lot of work. We need others to help. And we need to be this our own mission as members. And I believe we create a minority again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Real quick, we have a couple of new people, and I want to see if they have any thoughts.
I just wanted to touch just real quick on storytelling. So I'm Jessica Iturralde. I'm the communications director for the Love Your Neighbor community. But I'd like to just speak very briefly from a humble perspective of a journalist. And that is to say that we need your stories. So I'm fairly new to your space. I'm learning a lot about you all, but just from an outsider's perspective, I see there's so many potential, so much potential for stories, and they're sacred, and they're just very important. And I'm so glad to hear that we have a media initiative that's being launched here that is very exciting. But I just wanted to give that outsider's perspective, that there are a lot of passionate journalists out there that are trained to come in, and they are passionate and compassionate. They want to sit with your people. They want to listen. They want to learn the context. And they want to be able to very carefully craft and understand that perspective and be able to build a bridge and connect the dots from this group that is working in such important and diverse areas, and to be able to connect that dot to civil society or just general public.
Greg, I'm just gonna take 2 seconds to talk about the media council, because I know our time was a little short yesterday.
We're already out of time.
Yeah, there's 2 pieces we're gonna do, just so everybody knows. The first is that we're going to convene all the existing storytellers. Not all as in like a holistic call, but on the calls, when you join a media council call, there will be mainstream media there for this exact purpose. Not to recruit or bribe or, hey, cover our stories, but to say, hey, do you know so-and-so, and do you realize they're doing this, and this is the story? Because you're absolutely right, media just needs access to those stories. But also part of the vision of the media council is to make sure that all of us here can become citizen journalists. And so this is your point, right? The marketing, how to tell your own stories, how to take your stories to media, how to build those relationships. We'll provide those training and educational pathways so that everyone has the resources, everyone has the network and the contacts. But I just wanted to elaborate very quickly on that point. That's the vision. We'll be sharing that vision, the strategy, and all the data I shared yesterday with you, and you'll all have that by the end of the year. So going into the new year, you'll have those resources to start thinking about media, marketing, storytelling, and connecting with media in an informed way.
Thank you. There are a couple of new people. I don't know. Colin, do you have any thoughts you could share just based on being here in the last couple of days? You haven't been in the room with us before.
Thanks for giving me notice for that. I'll do my best. I learned a long time ago that, you know, and I'm certainly not the smartest person in the room. I'm not the richest person in the room. Probably the most handsome. But I learned a long time ago that our greatest resource is in our relationships. You know, there are very smart people, there are very connected people. Those with the greatest relationships, that's their biggest resource. And so I think that comment was made earlier, is this a social club? Isn't it a social club? What is it? I found it very helpful, so I'm very grateful that I was invited to be here. But it is this space, freedom of religion and belief is a real marketplace. There are a number of organisations. You've got the summit, and you've got the ministerial going on, you've got the secretariat, you've got the brilliant form of police in Abu Dhabi, and there are others. And I think I think we all have a part to play, either at a macro level or a micro level. And as some of you know, I had a long career in politics before I retired. I do think that once you've been inside a sausage factory, you don't really want to eat sausages. You know, and when I think about politics, I do think that there is a much bigger potential for the civil society and for the corporate work that we've heard about than I think many of us would believe. I think once you've been in politics for any length of time, you realise how limited it is, and you also realise how, you know, the competing agendas and the competing egos that exist there. So I think there is plenty that more can be done within the civil side and the corporate side. I was very fascinated to what our brother said earlier about Coca-Cola only ever being within one arm, you know, whatever it was, having a Coca-Cola within arm's reach of every person on the planet. Well, they didn't need government to do that. They just gone and did it. And I think that's a good metaphor that we should get hold of. But for me, I'm now running reasonably large NGO that works in this space. So for me, the way I said to my team is, around the world is, look, we do it like this. We build a relationship, we gain trust, and then we'll get success. It's always in that order. We're funders, right? So people give us money, we aggregate it, and then we spend it on projects. And one of the great things about being here for the last few days is I've met a number of people that I think we can probably trust them, I think we can get along with them. We've got sort of similar ideals. Maybe we can take that relationship further. So we start with a relationship, it then creates trust, and then you get success. You can't shortcut the trust bit. You can't go straight from relationship to success without the trust bit in the middle. So that's where I think there's some real value in this, and I'm looking forward to doing what I can, to see that success happen. I get it. I'm kind of a bit more muscular in terms of my approach to things. I like to see hard action. I like to see results. I don't want just talk. I want to be able to see that religious minorities or people who are suffering are given the resources that they need and the protections that they need. One of the comments that I was going to make yesterday was that brilliant film that was shown yesterday. I hope you all got to see it. If you didn't see it, you can get it on YouTube, I'm told, or on the website. But one of the things, I've been traveling to the Middle East 30 odd years. And what I've seen from the Middle East is that religious freedom and tolerance is moving rapidly in a very progressive and very good direction. Spearheaded by Abu Dhabi, really, and then the UAE afterwards. But even in countries like Qatar, Bahrain, even Saudi Arabia, you're seeing much more tolerance today than there was even 10 years ago. And I think that's, we can thank Sheikh bin Bar and the team around them for that, which I think has been remarkable. But at the same time, in the West, in the so-called democratic West, we are seeing tolerance and religious freedom going in the opposite direction. What we've got to do as civil and corporate society is figure out, well, how do we encourage our brothers and sisters in the Middle East to keep on with their momentum, to encourage Qatar, to encourage Saudi Arabia, to encourage Bahrain and others to keep on with that momentum that they're making, and somehow at the same time arrest the decline in the West and hold out, whether it's journalists or politicians or educators, to account to say we've got to stop eroding the freedom and the human rights and religious freedoms of our people. Because if it carries on the way it is, believe it or not, I think we could end up as people of faith having more protection in somewhere like Abu Dhabi than we would have in Auckland or in London or in Paris. That's perhaps a dumb thing to say, but if you just take the arc of the last 30 years and you see the direction that it's going in, perhaps it's not so dumb. And I think there is a place for those of us in civil and corporate society to say, look at what's happening in Abu Dhabi, look at what's happening in Qatar, look at what's happening in Saudi Arabia with the tolerances that they're making, with the context that they've got, and look at ourselves with some shame that we have allowed ourselves to be eroded in the way that we are. So I do think that there is a part to play, and I hope if you have me back, I'll be able to contribute some more in the years to come. And then I'll come to time.
Charlie, do you have a good response? And then Ronnie, do you have any thoughts after Charles? Another new friend here, Charlie.
Yeah, just a further reflection on the strategic nature of the project that we're engaged in. And I do think there is something related to my comment about it being organic. The nature of the different component parts that we've been discussing, and the way in which some of them can relate and work together, but others find it very difficult to. And I think this particularly relates to the government sphere. And I think the government sphere finds it challenging to work too closely with business. The example of this is the transition back home in the UK. We are moving away from a world where public-private partnerships have been dominant for the last 20 years, really encouraged by Margaret Thatcher. But the new government is decisively turning against that. We have the prospect of a number of areas of our economy being deprivatized effectively. So there are problems. I mean, those of us who had the huge privilege and the God of being involved in Afghanistan saw the brilliance of the way in which the combination of the different component parts enabled an emergency to operate. The private sector supplied aircraft. Our wonderful volunteers and civil society provided both funding and the means of achieving the evacuation. But without the support of government, we wouldn't have got anywhere, because Charmaine needed the DoD to sign off on the manifests to fly people out of Mazar-e-Sharif. And although that's an extreme example, hopefully won't be happening again anytime soon, where we're having to evacuate so many people, it's those complex relationships and managing those complex relationships which is so important between the ministerial, ultimately a government-led project, the work that we're doing in civil society, our partners in the corporate sector, the volunteers, media, and what encourages always, I'm always hugely encouraged by our time together, is because this is the means of coordinating and encouraging good relationships between those different spheres.
Thank you. Any thought reflections you have?
Thank you, sir. I feel like a small fish in a very big pond, but I'm happy to be there because it's always good to be amongst the giants, but not like the Canadian-American relationship. I have 3 points to say. Number one, I think is the way I saw the last debates is very encouraging and very promising. It's not only multidimensional, but the issue there we are tackling is multidimensional, and each dimension has layers, so it's multidimensional, multi-layers. So we cannot generalize things. And secondly, when we speak about religious pluralism, it's not only complex, it is sensitive also. So the approach, the sensitiveness, we have to keep in mind of that so that we can move forward into a way there that is acceptable, let us say, in a generalized way. The second thing I think is very important to expand, and the roundtable approach I think is a very promising approach. It focuses from the grassroots, and also the up-down approach I think is very unique approach. Finally, I would say my third point, and which I intentionally forgot, because I want to bring the 2G that the panelists yesterday said, that in such, because I've been working with the Rohingya communities for more than 20, 25 years, and we see a leadership gap. And to bridge that one, the 2G that the other panelists yesterday said is very important, and gender and generation. So at least if we bring more young people and more gender-based people, even if they are not participating, if even they are women observer, it will be a good approach forward, I think, and I conclude. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We're out of time. So it's been a great discussion. The idea is to keep this going. And we can share some notes as we all go home and organize all this. And then, like I said, we have a series of events coming up. We'll be in Prague next month. With an event that's focused on like how to combat anti-Muslim hate. And anti-Semitism is supposedly linked with that. And so it's both are happening. Both are increasing. There's an event, mostly with Muslim majority countries on that topic next month. And then we have probably 3 to 5 minutes next year at least. So we can share info on all this and invite you to continue, on this journey with us. For now, we have lunch. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for sitting in this session and contributing.